Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast. What's happening, all my woods people? That is music from Wave 2, the latest album, Bright Side of the Earth, that I got to partake in. That song's called The Night. And KC, we've been doing some pretty cool stuff at night lately.
Yes, we have. And it's a touch addicting, to tell you the truth of the matter. Like, I'm ready to go do some more of it. Also, people kind of rage about it a little bit. Did you see that?
I saw there was a little bit of disappointment in the fact that we would put that on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with people. But we have been doing some thermal scouting, which is really, really, really cool, and I think super effective.
Man.
I don't really even have anything, like, there's no, like, questionable morality about it. Some states you can shine deer. I mean, in Texas, technically you can spotlight deer to scout, right? There's nothing wrong with that, so I don't understand what the difference is. But we've been driving around near some public parcels, near some private permission stuff, or places we dream about hunting, and looking at big bucks, and it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah. You know what? They make trail cameras and have for a long time that take pictures at night.
Interesting.
Did you know that?
Interesting.
So apparently, there's not much. People don't care about that too much.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, Dan. Like, the effectiveness, like what we have learned just in a couple nights of running around with that thing, like, is the real deal. So I think every summer we need to borrow one from somebody.
Oh, yeah.
For a little while.
Yeah, that's right. Probably forever, because I don't know if I'll ever buy one. But luckily, I've had friends that are pretty dedicated to the thermal life and can don't mind loaning it to us. So it's cool. Yeah. It's cool to have one that records too. Like, that's the best part. Yeah, some of the time the other night we didn't have a recording one, so it was kind of a debacle to where, like, let me see. I want to see what's out there, and then to kind of forget to, like, let the other guy see. And anyways, it's fun.
And then trying to get footage through there was like tough circus. So
it was.
But yeah, it was. We actually put together a video, if you haven't inferred that so far, and put that on YouTube of our thermal scouting session recently, and we saw a giant.
We did. I mean, we saw a couple giants.
Yeah, we saw a great deer, man.
Yeah, I even marked some of them as moose and caribou on my OnX as opposed to regular whitetail. That way I would know which one it was. But I'm sure it helps that there's velvet, so they just look like mass monsters. But if they look really massive with velvet, they're still probably pretty massive without it. Yeah. So pretty cool, man. And that actually translated over into some trail camera and scouting efforts that we did during the daytime and a couple days later, where we learned a whole bunch. Like, it's so cool to have that direction from that thermal scouting to know, like, for instance, how many times have we been in that specific parcel that you've been hunting the deer for 3 years, and, like, we're looking at the whole thing on the map, like, where he's at. Yeah. And then we went out there the other night, and it's like, pretty much
the first time I picked him up, that's where he's at.
Exactly. It's like, okay, so a lot of times during the off season, he's going to spend time right in that little area, and now our zone went from, like, a couple sections or whatever it is down to a pretty tight little window where we think we're going to be able to pick him up.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that was just a huge deal to be able to see, and even if that's not him. Right, it still was a shooter deer.
So, I'm not going to be that disappointed if it's not him.
No, I mean, because it's a big deer,
Yeah.
So, and he's using a similar pattern in the off season as the other big deer, if there are different deer, right? So like that's a pattern that big mature deer could possibly you could say that's the pattern. And what it did for me in that particular situation that I thought was really cool is it gave me, and like for years we've been chasing that deer and looking at a particular little pond and thinking, man, like I just would like to see what happens there in summer. But to get to that thing in the heat of the summer, you're just like, it's like such a drag through just so many briars and nasty stuff. And so, but we ended up like going, okay, well, like he's got to be, if that's where, I mean, we only saw him one night, but if that's where he hangs out a lot of nights, then he's staging, back this direction. And therefore that little pond has got to be, at some point, he's got to water there, I'm sure. And so we go in there, and we found a ton, obviously, of hog tracks, and busted hogs there, too.
Off the pond.
Right in front of you, dude. It was like literally like Pumbaa was like running through the grass. It was like a cartoon,
Yeah.
But it was a really just interesting situation that we were able to find where, I mean, there has to be deer going in there, I think, even though there's so many hogs. I'm sure they're going in there some. Well, and so we said, choke
you were actually on another podcast that I listened to today. It was Hunt for Real with Tony Peterson. And I thought something that he said was super interesting. He said, if there's water there are deer using it. He said, no question. He hasn't hunted Texas, but he's hunted in places that are more arid or very similar to where we hunt. And he was like 100% confident that it happens no matter what. Like you're going to get deer using it. So I thought that was interesting.
He's a big proponent of water hunting.
Yeah, it's like his thing, man.
Yeah, and that's what has, then the reason I went and set that camera, it's a lot of different reasons that have kind of brought us to this, I guess, this head or whatever. But like when we talked about that, just talked so much about water and so hyped about it that like that's what kind of gave me this idea to do that. So, but he would know, I think. You know what I mean? Like he's done it enough and hunted in a lot of different states, like you said, that he would know. So it gave me, the idea to do that. And I thought I heard the same thing today when I was listening to it, just to make sure I didn't sound like a dummy. I took note of that statement that he made where he was like, there will be deer at it.
Yeah, it's not like maybe. And the interesting thing is like he hunts a lot different than we do, where he's taking short trips and trying to fill a tag when he goes. So that's got to be a pretty efficient and effective way of hunting. Not just like hey, if you've got a giant buck, hunt here all season, you'll see him once kind of thing. It's like, he's going on 3 and 4 day trips to places and expecting to see a shooter buck at these water holes. So pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of hope that we go in there and every 2 or 3 days or 3 or 4 days, there's a big buck in there at that pond, And if that's the case, that really gives us a good opportunity to feel good about our first hunt, which we didn't last year on opening day. You know what I mean? So
we did until we got there.
Well, yes, we did. And then it was raging sweat.
It was terrible.
It was one of the more muggy days I've ever spent in the woods, and we were just like, it was like a mile and a half from where we parked to get there. So just, not cool.
Not good. And that's even on a cooler morning. But throughout all this stuff, man, we just are constantly learning and finding out new things. And it's like, not that we ever think we're good at this, but we think that we're like, it's something we can do. It's like, it's our thing, right? So you kind of feel good about what you do. And then every year it's like, man, I just learned something completely different. And it's going to change my hunting strategy next year for sure. And, that's kind of what this thermal scouting did for us.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, one thing that's exciting is like, I feel like just we'll always be getting better as we're doing this, because and that keeps it from getting stale, And I think for a long time you can hunt. That's a cool thing about it. So, and we've been hunting for a long time, and we're going to talk about, that's kind of the whole thesis of this podcast, is for us to talk about basically all the big bucks and bulls that we have killed over the years.
That's right. But before we do that, all right, I need everyone stop what you're doing, go give the Element Podcast a rating on iTunes/Apple Podcasts right now, because you're going to win a pair of binoculars. It's going to be you. You're the one. VORTEX 10x42 Diamondbacks. They're bad to the bone. If you don't win that, you just might win some OnX or something else cool. If we get another 50 more reviews, we are going to give away a sweet trail camera. Probably one of our favorite trail cameras. We're going to give one of those away. So go over there, leave that review, guys, and then now we are going to get back to the bulls and bucks.
Let's do it, man. I'm going to start us out with, sorry about that. I'm going to start us out with my first buck.
First buck ever.
First buck ever,
First buck
dude.
ever.
I don't think I've ever been more excited to shoot a deer, and I've been really excited to shoot some deer.
Yeah. I've seen you pretty excited sometimes.
we had a party in 2017, didn't we? In the tree party. That's what we need to.
Party.
That's our statement right there.
Oh.
Tree parties. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about my first buck, and I was 9 years old, so this is like 1947, and I was basically, brand new deer hunter that year. I had tried to shoot a deer off my dad's shoulder here in Rains County.
How'd it get up there?
Well, yeah, the deer was not on my dad's shoulder. That's a good point. Be careful how you speak, right? Use punctuation correctly.
That's right.
So we were walking into a stand one afternoon, and the farmer next door had planted oats. And we are walking in. We come to the edge of this field. There's deer out there. And when you're young, like, you don't have a clue what's going on. And your dad's just like, there's a buck right there. There's a buck right there. And I'm like, how do you know? Like, he's so far away, he's just tiny little buck, And he goes, here, shoot off my shoulder. And I was like, oh, no. So I'd only shot off like bags, or whatever, tables. And so I pull up and I shoot, and we assumed it was a gut shot. Mm-hmm. And that's so long ago, I can't even remember the details of it really. But I just remember just searching for that deer and being kind of crushed about it and not knowing. The thing is, like, I knew so little about deer hunting. It was, I couldn't make assumptions or anything. It was just like I totally had to rely on my dad to understand deer and why we didn't need to search anymore for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like we weren't going to find it and this and that. So anyway, fast forward towards I think it was December, and my dad's buddy, who he still hunts with, TJ, you know him. You don't know him. You know of him.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
I'm well versed in TJ.
Sure. So anyway, he has a foreman that works for him that his family owns property in Ensenada, Texas. I don't know if you know where Ensenada is, but it's way down there. I don't know, it's like 30 miles from the border or something like that. It's in the brush country. It's in good stuff. I think it's Webb County, I think.
That sounds right.
Historical Big Buck County down there. And so
That's why Webb has two B's.
That's right.
Big Buck.
Big Buck. WBB. Anyway, so we go down there, take the 9-hour trip or whatever it is to get down there. And we're in Ensenada, Texas, man. There's a taco shop and nothing really else going on down there. And I'm young or whatever. So we go to hunt this 100 acres, and it's grazed pretty heavily by cattle and stuff. And we spend, a couple of hunts hunting these box blinds, and we get up in this big one kind of in the middle of the property one morning, and we're waiting, and, I'm just trying to be quiet and everything. And all of a sudden, a little buck steps out into the sendero, and I, take aim. He's probably like 80 yards. Shoot him, and he runs in the brush, and I was so disappointed, My dad's like, I think you made a good shot. I was like, I don't know. I felt good about it, but, like, why did he run so far? And so we get down after a few minutes, head up the sendero, and he ran like 13 yards. Like, he's just right there on the edge of the sendero,
Yeah, cool.
Heart shot with a 243 youth model, which I still have today, and I've shot tons of animals with it. It's just one of my sweetest shooting guns. And anyway, I can just remember he's just a basket 6-point, just 3 on each side, and he was tiny, year and a half, and probably like 8 inches wide, And man, I was just so excited. Like, I can't tell you, I was just on top of the world, man. And when I can remember one thing about that buck that was pretty interesting is that, like, he had tons of cactus spines in him.
Yeah.
Everywhere. They just, it's like they just never get rid of them. They just get some here and get some there and whatever.
I tell you, like a South Texas deer shin is like the worst. Like, can you imagine?
Yeah.
They just get torn up.
If you're going to grab a deer from South Texas, you need to have gloves on.
Yeah. And it's pretty tough to like harvest the shanks off of a deer from down there. Yeah. They're full of nasty.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. And they're T9C. So, but I bet you a year and a half old little Ensenada buck is a pretty tasty little critter.
Don't remember. I'm sure we put a lot of ground meat into the freezer out of them. So I don't know. Back then things were different.
Yeah,
but anyway,
that's awesome. Do you have a picture with that buck?
I do, man. I got a picture with him. That's one of my favorite. I got a So this is back before things got real digital, but I had we used to put together photo albums, and so I've got an album up to a certain point in my hunting life that has a lot of my pictures, so I'll have to post that one.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's real cool. So I have a first, too, but the one I'm going to start off with is my first bull. And I probably have told this story on the podcast before, but it never gets old for me. Something about it.
Did we tell this one? I can't remember.
I think we've told it, but our first original telling of it never made air.
That's right.
Yeah, because it was when we were back practicing podcasting. Yeah, we did that, guys. I know you probably don't think we did, but we did. And it was 2016. You and I had just started hanging out, hunting together. I actually didn't live in East Texas at the time. We had gone to Arizona together, and we'd fished together one time before that, and we were talking about it and whatnot. And you were like, dude, you're going to get it done this year. I know you are. And I was like, I don't know why you say that. It's the same as every year. But that year I had dedicated myself to start learning to call. And that was around the time, a little bit before there, I'd started with whitetails. But I think we talked about this a while ago. Might have been off air, but like there came a point in life when it's like I can actually strive to do better at this and be a better hunter, not just go for the fun of it. And it was around the time I was like, my family's been going to Colorado since the late 70s going hunting, and they have the same success rate for the past 30 years. What can I do to change that? What can I do to make us better at this thing? And that's how we always kind of treat the elk hunt. It's kind of an us thing. Even though you go off by yourself for two guys, like it's if the camp gets an elk, it's a good trip, And for the past 30 years, it's about an elk every 10 years is what we were averaging. And I was like, okay, I see these guys like Corey Jacobson and them just going in there just ripping it to shreds with bugles. And nobody really does that in the unit we go to. Guys bugle, but they're just contact bugling, and they don't know what to do with it afterwards. So I learned how to bugle that summer, and I worked for the state, so I got to drive around in the truck all the time. So I was bugling like 6 hours a day. I blew out like 4 diaphragms through the summer, just getting after it. Because what's better than cranking a bugle inside the cab of a truck in Houston traffic? So it was cool. Yeah. So we head to Colorado with my parents, just us three on this trip, which is really cool. It's always a family thing when we go, except in 2017, we went, you, me, Brennan, and Matt, brothers, but not blood family. So that was fun in its own right. But it's always been a family thing for me going to Colorado. And we went up there, and, dude, no kidding, we always go up and kind of make it there in time for evening hunt. And evening hunt usually is kind of a get your feet under yourself and get used to elevation more than anything. So we walk around during evening hunt. I hit a couple bugles, don't hear anything, and kind of, I don't know, lost my confidence in it a little bit. Get up the next morning, I kind of have already map scouted out. It's also the year I got OnX, so I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to all these new places. So I go down, and I have this plan of like spotting a bull way down in the valley and then going after him later in the day. Well, I didn't see a dang thing after looking over like probably 30 square miles of country. I never saw an elk that morning. But I decided to kind of bugle my way up the drainage back to camp. And about 2 bugle spots later, I see like this guy like stalking me because he thinks I'm an elk. And I was like, okay, I fooled that guy over there. That's pretty cool. So that was a fun deal. So meet up back with my parents. We go eat, do our thing, and then decide we're going to go to a place that we'd never been before, but I'd found on the map because it was further away from the roads than anything else in the unit pretty much. And went in there, didn't see a whole lot the first part of the evening. We're kind of sitting down on a log, eating a snack, kind of debating on heading back to the ATV, and then hear a bugle let off about, I don't know, a quarter mile over. And I looked at my dad, he looked at me, and my mom's like, what's going on? Because she can't hear quite as well as us, I don't think. but I said, you want to go? He said, yeah. So we take off up the hill. Can't really locate that elk again. So we just go to doing just a call and sequence, just decide to go crazy and make our own rut fest. And it almost is like, okay, the evening's almost over. Let's just have some fun and just see what happens, which is the most overused phrase in hunting, by the way. See what happens. But
I just thought that yesterday. I've been watching Chasing November.
I know, dude. It's like the way you wrap up a tree stand interview. But sometimes things get so like entrenched that you don't want to change them because it's just tradition. I think that's what it is now. But anyways, we start having us a bugle fest, me and my dad, and we're kind of going back and forth, I guess, kind of releasing some inner testosterone at each other, you know, like it's like the chance you get to yell at your dad, but nobody's mad about it, you know, through a bugle tube. And then all of a sudden, out of the dark timber, about 100 yards up the hill, like that just deep bellow of a bugle that rattles your chest happens, and it, you know, your head whips around and says, "Oh my goodness, it's happening!" And we then continue on with the bugle fest with this bull. He knows something's up because he can't see the elk that he's hearing. And then all of a sudden, I hear another bugle rip off to the west in an elk that I can't see. And then I look back up, and I'm trying to get a 60-yard shot on the bull that's up the hill. And I've got two aspens blocking vitals perfectly. I can see rump and I can see head. And then I look back down the drainage where that other bugle came from, and there comes a bull just beelining straight downwind of me is where he's headed. He's headed to get the wind of all these bulls and cows and try to figure out where the hot cow was that was in this big mix. Well, I take about 2 bounds down. You've been there. It's almost like it's terraced on the side of that hill. It's kind of a north-facing hill slope, and it's kind of terraced. It's an aspen, like parky kind of area. And I go down like 2 terraces, and the bull is actually out of view because he's lost some elevation. So I go down 2 terraces, and then I start to see that bull again, and he's about to flank me. He's coming from left to right, and I don't have any time to range or anything. And I just pull up. I'm at full draw, but you know that thing you do before you're like actually bearing down, your bow's actually kind of over to the right, and you're kind of looking over your arm. And I pick out my lanes. I've got 3 lanes. I've got a pretty good lane, I've got a decent lane, and then I've got something that's going to be real tight. And I say, okay, I got to shoot him in one of these lanes. And by the time I thought that thought, he'd already made it through the first lane. I was like, okay, well, it's time to go. So I throw my 40-yard pin on that second lane, and as soon as I see, so like they have like a dark brown, neck.
Mane,
yeah. And then it goes to kind of blondish, especially on the bulls. Cows are kind of more of a straight color with a little bit darker head. Bulls are really blonde in the back and really dark in the front. And as soon as I see blonde enter my sight picture, I squeeze off. And boy, that arrow float. It was flying so good. And like, I don't know if you probably know the feeling, but like you like watch the arrow the whole way. You don't like look at the animal, wait on the arrow to hit it, right? You like watch the arrow leave. And I'm watching it, and then about 3/4 of the way it's there. I'm like, oh no,
he's moving fast.
He's moving real fast. I did not account. I should have squoze off. That's my word, by the way, squoze.
I do like it.
I should have squoze off probably when I saw his nose to make it right. But arrow's flying through the air. Arrow's flying so pretty, and I see the bull continue on, and I'm like, oh no, this is bad. And then I hit him like Paunch City, like what you think is a really bad shot, and my heart sinks. But that bull spins and turns around and runs like a crazy animal and just takes out fast. And then I'm like kind of freaking out because I shot a bull either way. Like I'm excited, right? This is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me in my life at this point in time. And then I hear a crash. I'm like, no way, kind of that kind of thing. And elk make a ton of noise anyways. So I hear a crash. I don't know what's going on. My parents are still trying to kill this other bull, and I'm waving at them, and then they're still trying to kill the bull. I'm like, no, come here. So finally they come down the hill, and I tell them the story. They had no idea any of this happened. So they calm me down, and we go down to where the shot happened, and I couldn't find any blood. I was like, oh no. This is going to be so bad. But the good thing is it's the first day, so I'm thinking I got 6-7 more days to track this thing, whatever, worst case scenario. We walk about 5 yards further, and then it's just like somebody took the plug out, and it was the best blood trail I've ever seen in my life to this day. Elk got a lot of blood, right?
Sure, yeah.
Big old arteries. What happened was I went in and I clipped not the femoral, but the aorta runs down the length of the spine until it gets back to the hips, and I clipped the aorta. Arrow just zipped right through, and then he was just pouring out both sides, and he made it like 75 yards and piled up. And I could not believe when we walked up on that elk. Bad shot. I've practiced since then and learned from that not to take that shot, but it killed him and he was dead, and I was super happy. It's not like he suffered or anything, It just wasn't ideal, but luckily it just happened to, hit something super vital. And, dude, it was unbelievable. Like it's so surreal being a Texan who dreams his whole life about elk hunting, going and actually killing a bull on public land. Like it's like almost one of those things where you've set yourself up for this goal so much that it seems unattainable, but you try all the time, and then it actually happens. You're like, wow, this is pretty sick. So I'm ready for you to do it, man.
Then you just brook trout fish.
That's
the
right.
whole time.
I actually had one of the best weeks of trout fishing of my life after that. Caught some killer brookies. Caught some as native as it gets Colorado River cuts, and then caught some like tank football rainbows in town.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was a good week, man.
That
was a good week.
Eating elk steaks and catching trout.
Man,
just looking at your horns every morning.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Dude, that is cool, man. I was really excited for you when I got the news of that, and that was. I'm sure you'll just remember that thing to a T for the rest of your life.
It is ingrained, man. Yep. Like that memory will be there.
Well, speaking of traveling out of state, well, first of all, that video or the video of that year is online, and that's like our whole season, and you get to see a little trout fishing. Not a whole lot of elk footage because you weren't really carrying the camera too much then.
I think I had like a Canon 2i or whatever, Rebel.
It like wouldn't focus.
Yeah, it was bad, but I got some trout fishing footage from there, but I was kind of concentrating on killing an elk at that point in time. I didn't want to film nothing.
Well, it was cool, but anyway, so back to Kansas for our first couple of years. We had relatives up there, and this has been like 15 years or so, maybe. So that they didn't really understand. They weren't deer hunters really, so they didn't really understand like that we were going to Kansas to try to shoot big deer, And if it was a buck, it was a big deer to them. So like he was like, "Oh, we'll take you out in a truck. You can shoot one out the window, or whatever." And so they would take us around looking at property and be like, "There's one." We're like, "Yeah, it's a doe. We don't really want to shoot that because we spent some money on this tag getting up here and everything." And so anyway. He finally puts us on a property that you've been to, one of his friends, and he had this wheat field. It was kind of a small wheat field, and it was, I think he mainly planted it just to have deer around his property because he liked to see them. He didn't really hunt or anything. But at the same time, like he understood people hunting them and stuff. So anyway, I don't know if this was the first year or the second year. I can't really remember now. But one of the early years, we didn't have a place up there. And so we're sitting on each end of this wheat field. My dad's on one end, I'm on the other end, and we can't really, it's kind of small, but there's elevation to where we can't really see each other, And so he ends up shooting, and I, hear him shoot or whatever. I don't know what it is.
This was rifles?
This is rifles, yep. And we kind of, being that we were from Texas, we didn't really understand that you could still shoot deer in that open country with bows. So like we took rifles, we were like, if we're going to go up there, we just want to make sure if the big one walks out, we want to shoot it, So anyway, he shoots a deer. I don't know what it is. I can't see it, anything like that. And this is in the afternoon, and it was it had been snowing and stuff. And I didn't really set the story up well because we actually like a day or two prior to this, we were in his buddy Dennis's truck. All four of Dennis, his son, my dad, and I, all four of us drove up there in his truck. And his truck, like brand new truck, just stopped working all of a sudden. We could not figure it out. And anyway, ends up that it was something really simple that we could have fixed if we'd have known. It was a fuse, I think, is what it was. But apparently, even the shop that we took it to, they took the entire truck apart to figure out what it was. So,
it was so simple that they couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I understand that.
And this was back when, I'm sure this is back when cars got a little more digital, you know what I mean? And so, but anyway, so we were in a rental minivan. And so my dad shoots this deer, and then I end up shooting basically a spike. it was last minute of the hunt or whatever in the afternoon, and we had spent time doing this truck deal on part of our trip, and so I see a deer, it's a spike, and I'm like, I'm gonna smoke him. So I'm free-handed with a rifle, and I shoot and I miss. He takes off running, and long story short, I end up shooting this deer at 197 yards steps with my gun in free-handed, and he goes straight down or whatever, And so we got those 2 deer, and then one of them shot a doe, I think. And so we're in a minivan that's white. It has been snowing, and it's like sloshy, And so this minivan turns brown, and then we throw 3 deer on top of it after gutting them out. And it's literally just a mix of blood and mud on this minivan as this is probably not representing hunting very well. But at the time, we just we didn't have any other options really. Sure. So we end up taking these deer to the dealership, throwing them in the back of the truck, and then taking the minivan back to the rental place without washing
man.
Because we were kind of on a time crunch,
Yeah.
And anyway, so that's a pretty interesting, fun story. But it kind of leads me to, I guess it was the next year, we finally had found a place to kind of hunt up there and to kind of do things the way we wanted to. And this spot was so sweet, man. We had some awesome hunts down here back in the day. And we were still rifle hunting at the time. I was a bow hunter, but we just still had rifles because we just thought it was just one of them deals where this is a long time ago, and we're thinking like, at any moment the world record could walk out, right? Mm-hmm. And we want to shoot it, you know. So we got rifles, and I'm sitting like 50 yards away from this. Basically, I'm actually sitting like 20 yards away from fence crossing here, and but I'm sitting in a ground blind in some cedars, so I can't see the actual fence crossing. And so it's just one of them. It's one of them evenings, dude. It's just like quiet, like light and variable wind kind of thing, and it's golden hour. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there. I think there was some does out in front of me, kind of, and all of a sudden I hear a thump, and the fence wire kind of pops, And I was like, oh baby. And so on the way up, stopped at a Bass Pro, and I had seen one of the biggest 8-points behind the gun counter that, they always have giants back there. And I had seen one of the biggest ones I'd ever seen. It was like a 183 8-point. It's giant, like they don't get any bigger. And so all of a sudden this deer steps out after like 30 seconds. I see him come around the cedars, and he's at like 30 yards at this point. I could have smoked him with a bow. And, I put my scope up on him. Like when he first steps out, he's facing away. So the best angle, And I promise you, the first thing I thought was he's that deer from the Bass Pro counter. He's a 183 8-point. And so like I put my scope up. Yes, he's an 8, or whatever. He's not broken. He looks good, And so I just put it on his shoulder and shoot, and he runs off. And I don't know what happened. We end up. I feel like I made a pretty good shot because it was a close shot, Once I get back to the truck and we all meet up, I'm like, yeah, I shot one. He's pretty good. The whole time I'm thinking I literally just shot a 180, And so we go track him, and we walk up on him, and nobody knew what he was because I just kind of played it off as like, yeah, it's pretty good, or whatever the whole time. And we walk up on it, and it's a slick 8 that's a 154. So not a 180, but he's one of the biggest 8s you could imagine shooting.
When I look at that deer on the wall, it doesn't look like an 8-point because it's so big.
He's huge.
You start counting, you're like, that's only 8 points. It's so big.
He is, dude.
It's crazy.
And he's like got tine mass and stuff, which is like an immeasurable that just makes the deer look bigger,
Yeah.
But just a huge deer, and everybody just freaked out whenever we saw it, And anyway, that was just a great.
You shoot him with the 243?
Shot him with a 300.
Oh,
which is one of my least favorite guns I ever owned.
It's terrible. They hurt so bad.
Dude, and it was a Ruger plastic stock composite or whatever.
Oh.
And it also had they had this cool little thing in the buttstock where they indented it and then put the Ruger logo in it. Mm-hmm. So every bit of the 300's force focuses through literally like an 1/8 of an inch of plastic.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it all just channels down into there and then smokes into your shoulder.
Yeah. The gun probably weighed like 6.5 pounds or something too. It's probably just ridiculous kick.
Yeah, it was not my favorite gun.
It will put an animal on the ground though.
Oh, it did. It has done a few. And I don't even think, I think my dad sold that gun. He bought us 2 of them at one point. I think he got a little deal, and we didn't like them much.
Yeah, they're kind of tough to shoot when they're that way. But that's cool, man. That's one of the favorite deer that I see around. It's the one that's on your wall.
I still, if I look at all my deer on the wall, that's the one I always look at.
He's got good color on his hide and stuff too. You know,
real pretty.
He's a good looking buck. I got a rifle buck too that's kind of memorable. I would have guessed this would have been probably 2010, something like that. I was still in school, and I'd come home. For Thanksgiving and winter break, I'd go hunt doe days and Thanksgiving, and then, during winter break, I'd come in December and hunt too. And that's back when we all kind of really thought that the heart of the rut was in December around here anyways, and we kind of drifted away from that a little bit more now. At least think there's not really much of a heart, but either way, really was hunting hard, and, late December, and I had my coveralls on, and we were fixing to walk in. Well, I think we'd hunted that morning on this permission place we had, kind of old dairy country, really. And we'd hunted that morning, hadn't seen much, and it started misting. And we kind of got together. We were going to eat a snack. And I think what we were doing is we were about to make a loop and do a little bit of a deer drive. We kind of like to do that, kind of learned that in South Texas. Kind of not like a woo-woo, but just like kind of a push or whatever you'd call it. And my dad was going to be the pusher. I was going to be the sitter. And I was walking down to my spot, and it's down at this little field corner, which I hunted that place a lot. And all of a sudden, I see some commotion, and out runs this buck. And then behind him are 2 coyotes that are just giving him everything they got. They're trying to eat this buck. And I, look at this, and I can't figure out, it all happens in a flash, right? I'm trying to figure out how to process this and what to do about the situation. And I'm like, look at those dang coyotes. Oh, look at that buck. And then I start looking at him. I was like, that's a really big deer. For me at that point in life and around here, I'd still smoke him to this day. And so I was like, okay. And so I threw my gun up. And this is 70 yards away. Shoot that deer. And I aimed at the peak of his shoulder because he's kind of quartering to me, but he had no idea I was in the world. He's looking at those dogs. And drop him on the spot. The funniest thing was those coyotes looked at each other and they're like, dang, we're pretty good, dude. I guess they thought they did it. They didn't know what was going on. This deer just drops right in front of them and they're like, that was easy. And then, my process is okay, well, there's still animals there. And I shot a coyote right then too. So I shot a deer and a coyote at the same time. Third coyote runs off, or second coyote runs off. But anyways, that was the craziest thing. And now I kind of look back at it in this situation today, I don't know if I would shoot that deer if that was going on. I don't know. It's just kind of weird.
Kind of feel a little weird about it?
Yeah, I kind of feel a little weird about it. I'm not saying it was wrong or anything, but it just it feels a little weird looking back. But at that moment in time, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to shoot that. Yeah. He's a big buck. And that's probably, in East Texas, that's probably the most mature buck I've ever shot. I mean, he was in that 5+ kind of range. Big neck. Awesome. Just a 8-point, that was probably mid 120s or whatever. But he was a big deer, and I was stoked about it. It was real cool. And the other cool thing is that it was at that point in my life where I wasn't getting to hunt very much, and for it to just come together and get to come home and shoot a deer, it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's just interaction. Well, you always hear about coyotes and how they're bad, and everybody wants to shoot them, and you're like, well, how many deer do they really kill? Well, those 2 were really trying to kill the baddest dude in the woods. Yeah. And it's just 2 of them,
That reminds me of, I think we were in a hotel. We were watching some Sportsman Channel or something. Some dude, Buck was trying to get up on a doe and breed her, and some dude smoked him off the doe. And I was like, dadgummit, dude, I could not do that.
It's just these little things that there's no written rule about, but you're like, I don't know.
At least let him, get a little bit normal, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty cool, man. I kind of have my stories here set up chronologically, so I don't have a good bridge to this one. But this next story is from 2000. So it'd be 2005. Maybe it was 6. Was the first year I shot a deer with a bow. And so I shot a lot of deer with rifles, over the years or whatever, and had done some bow hunting. We didn't really have, I don't guess, a really great lease when I was in high school, and I was playing a lot of football and stuff. And so, hunted with a bow, but I got a permission around here to hunt with a bow, and had a legal. This was right when the rules had changed to like unbranched or 13 inches, and I had a 3-point come in right off. First afternoon I hunted. He came right to the base of my tree, and I shot him like 3 yards, and just didn't bend at the waist, and shot high, and there was like no blood, just high shoulder shot. I'm sure he lived. I think I've told down the story before, or on the podcast before, but anyway, so. Until I was basically 18, I guess, I didn't shoot a deer with a bow. So at that point, we're sitting in the same stand I shot the big 8 out of, and we're actually sitting in a bow stand at this point. And my dad's hunting with me, which was cool. I think he had already tagged out. This may have been my first year of college. I can't remember, but I was 18, I believe, and so anyway, I had time to hunt that year because red shirt or whatever, I guess, if that was the case. But end up, we're sitting there the first afternoon, and look down the draw, and here comes a buck and a doe. And the buck is on the upwind side of the doe. It's weird. And he's just paralleling right down the creek, and they're just walking straight towards us. And they come out, jump the fence in the same spot, and they're traveling down the creek, and they come out, and it gives me like a 22-yard shot, just slightly quartering away, and smoked him, dude. Like, I'm talking one of the best shots that I've made. I felt like passed through, and this dude ran like 250 yards. Yeah.
Golly.
And my dad was pretty sure he saw him go down, but I wasn't so sure. We got down there, and I think he was where he thought he saw him go down, but he was way down there, dude. But that was my first buck with a bow, and he was a 10 that was kind of busted up, probably in that like mid 120s to low 130s kind of class deer, and probably a 3-year-old, and man, it was so awesome. Like, just to be able to do that with my dad and everything, and then I actually ended up shooting a buck like a week later in Texas as well with my bow. So I got 2. I hadn't shot one in,
that's cool,
until I was like 18. I shot 2 in about a week. So.
Yeah. So I shot my first buck with a bow with a family member too, except it was my mom.
Yeah.
I might have told this story on the podcast, but I've got video. This is the first hunt I ever filmed. And my mom filmed it while I was hunting. It was pretty cool.
Are we going to be able to put this on the YouTube channel?
We can. And in fact, this might expedite me doing it since we're going to discuss it today. It's on one of those old, I don't know, they're not cassettes.
Mini DVs.
No, it's a little bitty, it's a tape.
Called a mini DV.
Mini DV is what it's called? Okay. Yeah. So I need to...
or it might be an 8mm or whatever they are.
I think you can take it to Walmart and put it in the little photo thing, and they'll process it for you into a DVD or something. But anyways... I was in the tree stand with my mom, climbers, and they're like those old, like, metal climbers that, I don't know, each stand probably weighs like 20 pounds or something, and we found this, like, double V or V tree that there's 2 that you can go right up next to each other, and but you can only go down so far, like, so they only go down like 4 foot off the ground, so it's a good little jump down. So we get in there early in the morning. I'm in work boots and cotton Realtree pants, just the old school way of doing things. I guess this would have been the fall of 2006. And it's bow season, because around here, once it turns rifle season, you pick up a gun,
Yeah.
But at least that's how I did it back then. So I think it might have been October 14th for some reason that comes to mind, which is the October lull, by the way. And it's starting to get light, and I'm actually in that same corner that in a couple of years I will shoot that 8-point that I told the story about a while ago. So that corner has been good to me, or has through the years. But so we climb up or whatever, and it's just first light. I mean, it is still like bluish gray, everything is, right? And I look over, and through the woods, I see this pretty tall tree, but it's kind of scrawny, and I see it whipping around in the air. And I didn't think much of it, but I was like, why is that doing that? And then I just kind of went to piddling around, swatting mosquitoes or whatever. And then all of a sudden, on the field edge, probably 3 minutes later, they see a head pop out, and it's a buck. and it's a good buck. I just see, tines. I'm like, all right, I'm shooting this one. And the antler restrictions were in place then too. And I didn't take the time to get the profile. Or I only had profile. I didn't have width view of him, but I saw all these times. Like, oh, that's a shooter for sure. Well, I draw back. I'm shooting a 93 model PSC Thunderflight, I think is what it is. Old school bow, drawing 75 pounds, just flinging arrows hard, man. I mean, it hit hard. That was a good. I know our new bows are cool and all, but them old bows like that, you had to be a man to draw one, but you were gonna sling an arrow when you released it. So I was, Luna Maras, I think the Thunderhead broadheads or whatever, the Walmart specials, and I had this type of sight on this bow. It was like pieces of cellophane, and you had one that went up and down, and then you had three that went across, and where they made a X or a T, that was your yardages. I had 20, 30, 40 on there. And then I could actually shoot out to 70, but it was just you put that screw on it right there. And I wasn't going to shoot a deer, but it's always fun to shoot far. Yeah. Anyways, go back to the deer story. This buck comes out in the field and then veers out, quartering away. And I was like, oh no, he's about to get out of my life. It's like, this is my first chance to shoot a deer. It was really one of the first archery hunts I had done that season. And this buck starts to go away. So, just instinctual grunt stop. I had never grunt stopped a deer in my life, but within a half a second, I was like, okay, grunt stop. And he stops, looks. I let it fly. No range. I didn't even own a rangefinder back then. You know what I mean? 35. So I split between my two pieces of cellophane, and I just ripped. It's the best shot I'll ever make on a deer. I mean, I hit him as perfect gets, and I didn't get a pass through. I think I did. It was pretty similar to your shot on Nameless, but I was a little bit further back. So I still went in there and hit the
bunch of ribs and stuff.
The offside shoulder. Yeah, I remember because I looked at it because I was really interested in broadheads and stuff not different types because I didn't really understand that. But the internet was a new thing then, we weren't all about Amazon stuff, but I just was interested in what an arrow did to an animal. So when we skinned him, I looked at it and stuff, but I remembered it was 3 or 4 ribs back. So it was a quarter away, 3 or 4 ribs back, buried in an offside shoulder, and he mule kicked on the way out and went, ugh. And it's yeah, this is awesome. And I freaked out. The worst, you've seen the video,
yeah.
It was the worst freak out ever. With baby KC, just in the tree stand. And my mom is being a mom. My mom
putting the camera right in your face the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my mom is the mommest mom ever, okay? So she's just gushing with pride at this point. And then we calm down. Nobody has a cell phone. So we get down on the tree. My dad has no idea what's going on. He's hunting a different spot. And we start to climb down the tree. My mom's handing me my bow, drops it from about 10 foot up in the tree. So that was fun. The cellophane breaks on the bow. But I already shot one. So go pick up the blood trail. And the deer ran about probably 100 yards, which I've noticed that if you put a pretty good shot on a deer, but it's a lot more heart than it is lungs, they can make it a good ways on a heart shot, it seems. That lung shot, you take the air out of them, they really run out of gas pretty quick. But I think that this deer, from what I remember at least, it was mostly kind of heart, maybe that front part of the lung or something. But he made it quite a ways and bled a lot. It was the blood trail was easy, but made it up to him and counted all the points. And he's 11 point, counting the little half-inch kicker off the backside and everything, and was 13 1/8 wide. So barely made it. Yeah. Barely made it. So that was cool. But, yeah, first buck with a bow, and my mom was there to film it and stuff. So that was pretty cool, man. It was a pretty neat experience, and still one of the better deer I've killed in East Texas. He was probably a 2-year-old, honestly, but would have been just a champion buck one day. But I didn't care at that point in time. He's a toad, man. And still got that Euro today. He's just a cool-looking buck, and still very proud of that deer. I love to look at that deer.
He's a good deer for East Texas, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good buck. So pretty cool that was your first one, man. I mean, with a bow, I guess. So, So what year was that?
I think it had been the fall of 2006 because
Gotcha.
I was skinny. So I always kind of coordinate things with my football seasons, you know. So in 2005, I had beefed up a whole lot for football, and then 2006, I was changing positions and had lost a lot of weight, and I was skinny, and so that's how that all lines out in my head. Yeah.
Well, speaking of football, a few years went by from my first buck to the next one I shot with the bow, which was basically my senior year at SMU. We went to the Hawaii Bowl, which is on Christmas Eve every year. And so basically from, 1st of August until December 24th, I'm playing football, every day. And so I didn't get to hunt hardly at all that year. Well, we go and we beat Colin Kaepernick and the Nevada Wolfpack in the bowl, in the Hawaii Bowl, 45-10. We smoked them, and then we hop on a plane that night after a little delay, get back to Dallas. It has snowed in Dallas, and we make it back. I am tired of traveling. I'm trying to get back home and see my family for Christmas Day. It is Christmas Day, and I'm flying down the road, and I get a ticket. So that was cool on Christmas Day. That was a good Christmas present. Anyway, that's kind of beside the point. But we get back home. We spend a day or two at Christmas, and then my dad and I head back north, and he's like, "Man, there's a big deer." He'd already shot one, and so he's like, "Man, there's a big deer that been coming into my stand there," and I don't know how wide he is, but he's well over 20 inches wide, and he's just a big 6. And I was like, I'm shooting him if he comes in. I don't care because at the time, man, we had some big deer on the property, and we didn't even know for sure what all we had because we weren't running very many cameras or anything. And I was just like, at this point, it's late December, we're doing this thing. So get up there, first afternoon, I get in the stand. It's cold, it's overcast, and it's, I think, December 29th. And maybe in the first deer that came in, I look down the lane, and here comes big-bodied sucker. And he comes in, he's so wide, comes in, gives me a broadside side shot at 25 yards. And I hit back pretty far. I didn't make a good shot at all. Hadn't been shooting, just playing football or whatever. And so anyway, I probably just kind of torqued the bow and pulled it left. Hit back pretty far, and he hops, he takes off or whatever, 15 yards, and then stands there like, what in the world was that? And then he starts walking. He walks into this timber on the other side of the creek and beds down. And he's probably 60 yards from me. He's not far at all. He just beds down right there, and I can see him, And so. Or maybe, no, I couldn't see him at that point. I could see him for forever, and then finally he just kind of moseyed right where I couldn't see him, And so I told my dad or whatever, get down, and we go in there to look for him right before it gets dark. And I get pretty close to the edge of that timber, and I look in there, and he's literally sitting there bedded down 20 yards and hasn't seen us yet and doesn't know we're there. He's facing away. And I'm like, what in the world? And he's giant. When I see him, it freaks me out because I'm like, whoa, there's a beast right there, 20 yards away. So anyway, I'm like, hey, he's right there. He's right there. And so anyway, I knock another arrow, or I might have had it knocked or whatever. But I kind of take a couple steps over to get a little better angle on him and shoot him bedded down. And he runs out through the trees and then out, and we lose him or whatever. And so I can't remember if we went right then. I think we went back to the house maybe and gave him a little bit. Came back in the night and blood trailed him from there another probably 100 yards and found him. And the second shot, had put him down pretty good. And anyway, I was just so stoked. And the buck, but for the listener. I've never measured the deer, but my dad has, and he says as a straight-up 6 that he thinks that he would net Pope and Young. So he's a giant 6.
The bone.
He was almost 22 inches wide, I think.
Yeah.
So
how old do you think that deer was?
Very old. Yeah. I think he was a giant deer at one point, and he was on the decline.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't tell you how old, but he was just gray face, huge body, and had that just kind of gnarly old deer rack kind of thing going on. Real heavy though, still.
Yeah.
He's big, man. I mean, his brow tines, I can remember when I saw him to shoot that second shot, I can remember as he's facing away, the first thing I thought is, and I told my dad this after I shot him, he ran off, I was like, dude, his brow tines were wider apart than like a lot of bucks that I've seen, I mean, his brow tines are, I don't know, 11 or 12 inches apart probably. I mean, it's huge deer. So.
Yeah, he didn't want to fight a 1.5-year-old because that 1.5-year-old would get all up in his business.
stinging him on the forehead.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's a cool deer. And I think, if I remember right, that deer isn't skull mounted, it's skull plate mounted, right? Or is it skull mounted?
No, it's skull.
Okay,
Yep.
it's the 7.
The next one I'm going to tell you about is a skull plate. Yeah.
Gotcha. But I remember picking that thing up as the skull, I guess, and it weighs a lot more than you expect it to weigh. It's just got so much mass. It's cool, man. Real cool. So I kind of have a story a little bit about, hits and misses and all that kind of stuff. And this is...
We're getting to the sad part.
Ooh. Well, not real. It's not real sad yet. There's some sad in this.
Is
this
there?
happy.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is another bull story, and this is the 2018 bull. And this story could probably be told in its own podcast, and we may have done this. I don't know.
Yeah,
but for those of you who haven't listened, I'll just give you the short rundown. I won't give you a day by day. But one day,
Once upon a time,
I went elk hunting, and almost shot a cow, and that was the day. And then the next day, went in and had a bugle fest with a really nice young 6-point, which is 6x6 for people who don't elk hunt, and had that bull at like 9 yards. And there's footage of this all on the DIY 2018 elk hunt video on YouTube. But me and my mom both almost shoot this bull. He runs away finally. I think he wins us or something. And then there's a big Brangus bull out in this meadow that scares him and runs him back to us. And then I fling a shot at like 65 and end up hitting something on the way, and my air breaks, and so I don't get to kill that bull. So that was fun and kind of let down, but it was fun. And then that evening, we decided to go back to where I'd killed my 2016 bull. Went in and made this huge loop down below, down the mountain, and came back so the wind would be right when we approach it. And we get up to where the 2016 bull was. We all get spread out, and we're going to do the same calling sequence in almost the same spot, pretty much where the bone pile is. You've seen the bone pile of a 2016 bull. I'm about to rip the first bugle, and then we hear bugles up the hill, 2 of them. Just look at my parents, and they're like, okay. So we pick up and we head up the hill. Ends up we lose my dad. Me and my mom both have a bow, and we're heading up the hill, and we're stalking through. You might remember, but there's like some like willowy aspen thicket stuff up through there. We're stalking up through that. We called in a spike there that scared the tar out of us. You remember that? So we are walking up through that stuff, and those bugles are getting closer and closer, and I've got a good idea of where these elk are. So I go into stalk mode. We stalk in and kind of like have one of those times. It's like Pocahontas coming around the river bend. Like she moves the willow out of the way, and it's like, ta-da! And there's just like a herd of elk doing elk stuff. Like they have no clue we're there, and it's starting to rain and drizzle. So like scent, I always feel like when it's raining, like scent is a good, like it's not as big of a deal. Not that like if the wind was to blow that way, it'd be bad, but I just feel like when there's that moisture in the air, it's like your scent isn't making it far.
Down.
Yeah,
yep.
I don't know if it's real or not, but I feel like that way. Well, this the herd bull is there with him, and he's very blonde with really dark antlers. And I learned from the locals that means that they rub pines as opposed to, or spruces, they call them pines up there, but as opposed to the aspens. So he'd been rubbing pines a lot, and he wasn't really big antlered bull. I don't remember what he had really. He was 5-point plus. I couldn't really tell. It was getting pretty late, especially with the storm rolling in. It's pretty dark. We're still plenty good on shooting time, but you know how it is. Like if big clouds are in, it's kind of hard to see, especially in like thick growth timber. But there's like a couple cows around at like 15 yards, and this bull's at like 35, just kind of milling around eating. And he goes, wee. And it was the weirdest thing, because if you would have heard that and not known that he was 35 yards, you'd have thought that the bugle was 200 yards away. And he does that, And all I can assume is he's like kind of check bugling his cows, just saying, "Hey, I'm still here, ladies. Don't worry. Don't worry about anything. Everything's cool." So I kind of, as soon as he did that, I gave him like a, "Hey, I need you over here for some reason." And he just kind of turned his head sideways and just loafed my direction. It took him like probably 15 seconds to make 10 yards. And I draw when he's got his head behind an aspen, and I rushed a shot. I had all the time in the world. He was like barely moving. He was walking, but nothing, and elk are so big that when you're close to one, it's hard to imagine how far he is. Like, you overcompensate. So I guessed him at 30, and he was definitely at 20 or less. So I put my 30-yard pin on, and I'm solid as a rock, squeeze off, dunk, and I hit him high shoulder. And he, like, runs like 10 yards and has no clue what's happening. Like, didn't hurt him at all. Arrow's hanging out. There's a little bit of blood from the arrow. He's fine. And I'll knock another arrow, and I could get another shot. But throughout all this, I'd cow called to stop him. And when I cow called, this calf runs up and, like, is in our face. Like, from here to the wall is like 9 feet. I mean, I told my mom, I said, if I had a fly rod, I could have touched that calf on the head. It was right there looking straight at us. So I couldn't really do a whole lot, or it was going to bust out. So that bull's like at 60 at this point in time. I'm trying to get a range on him. That calf is still looking at me. I've got this rangefinder, and it's all wet and all this stuff from the rain. Can't get a good range, and I draw back, and then the bull there's some cows that bust, and then he starts following them and runs out of my life, and then it starts raining more. So, and moment's over. I'm like, well, Dad, gummit. So look at my mom. We're all kind of like, oh, man, it was bad. And she really doesn't understand. My mom loves to hunt. She hasn't done as much as I have. So she didn't really quite understand how bad the shot was. She's like, you hit him. I was like, well, it's kind of high. I'm not very confident in what happened just then, especially since there wasn't any blood and that bull wasn't hurt at all. But we pick up the blood trail. It starts raining real heavy, which also happened to you and me at that same place a couple years back. Had a torrential downpour.
Oh, yeah. Goodness.
So we call off the search for that night and said we're going to come back the next morning and look for him. And went back the next morning, found some promising blood, but it goes back to that thing I talked about earlier where bull elk just have a lot of blood. And, like, what I learned from that experience is that what's hardly, you can't even hardly call it marginal. It's like pretty much he's going to live kind of shot. Still produces quite a bit of just muscle tissue blood that comes out of an animal. And we probably blood trailed that thing for about 450 yards, I think, when I looked at OnX, how far we'd went and finally lost the blood trail and stuff. And throughout that day, my heart was just sinking further and further until I was like depressed. Like once we decided that the search was over, I was ready to be in East Texas at that moment. Like I'm done, ready to go home to my wife and just sulk, So, but my mom still has a tag, and I'm telling myself, like whatever. I don't really care to shoot another elk right now, but if we can get her something killed this afternoon, let's do it because the hunt's wrapping up that day. So we decided to kind of just sit on the side of this hill. We know that there's elk been in the area, but we've been all up in it too. Who knows what's going on? And like sat there for quite a while, napped. Naps in the elk woods are good things. And then got woken up by a little check bugle, and it was a young bull with 2 cows, and he's probably running for his life trying to keep his cows, And we chased them through the woods a little bit, and they take off. He wanted to come back and check on us, but the cows, they weren't about it. And then did some more sitting, and kind of were walking out and decided we were going to walk out kind of and call our way out just to kind of walk in the daylight as opposed to walk in the dark. And I was cow calling along, and we're walking, not trying to be too quiet or anything. And we hear a little off the side of the hill, and didn't know really what it was. But I think, looking back, we had disturbed a bull who was sleeping, and that was kind of like his startled noise. And then I cow called, and here comes a bull running at us, like running straight to us. And it's like, what do I do with myself right now? So I'd already told myself I wasn't going to really shoot another one because I'd wounded that one. I kind of assumed he was going to be okay, but I don't know. It just didn't feel good about it at that point in time. If I'd had a couple more days, I'm sure I'd have been ready to go hunt again, but it wasn't like like taking a moral stand. It was kind of more like, man, I don't feel like it, I just kind of hurt myself. And this bull runs in to about 30 yards and then, locks it up, got her wind. And I'm thinking, okay, my mom is going to get to shoot this bull. It's kind of what I was hoping would happen. Well, he gets her wind. He's behind some spruces or whatever, and then he takes off back up the hill. And I always have my cow call in my mouth. Meow! Gave him a good stop. He stopped, and he was like at 50. Mom can't shoot that far. And I'm drawing back. Like, of course, an animal runs and you draw back. Whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm drawing. And I hit that cow call, and I turned to my dad, or I didn't turn to him, but I whispered. He's on my left, my mom's on my right. And I said, how far is he? He said, shoot him. I wish you'd have been there to hear it. It was so funny. So I just anchored 50, and I just absolutely ripped this elk. I mean, straight up creased halfway up the body, just through both lungs. Actually went through both scapulas, through the thin part of the scapula.
Oh, really?
Passed through, yeah. And I think what happened is I had a pass through, but it's that the arrow was still hanging out the backside because my arrow ended up broken some way or another. I broke like 17 arrows last year. I only bought a dozen. I don't even know how that works, but had a broken arrow, but just could not believe that after all that emotional roller coaster that I actually pulled that off and was able to kill an elk. I kind of felt bad for my mom. She wanted to kill it for sure, but at that point in time, it's like, well, if I don't shoot now, nobody's going to get to shoot this bull. So I've shot 2 bulls and have not ranged either of them. So don't do like me, but, do what you're supposed to. But at the same time,
you're pretty good guess, so
hell,
I feel
maybe.
Like.
I don't know.
Next time you ask me how far, I'm going to do the same thing. Because last year, as you'll find out probably here in a second.
Yeah. Well, but anyways, killed that bull, and it's the second bull I got to kill in my family. But the cool thing about that one was like we were literally standing shoulder to shoulder when I shot him, and all 3 of us had the same memory of that arrow just ripping through him and going. What is interesting is that bull probably ducked about 3 or 4 inches by the time my arrow got there.
Really?
Yeah, I was going to hit him a little bit lower. It still would have been just fine. But, thinking back, he was kind of in the, spring out and go. Like, he was kind of already turning, So, elk can do a little moving at the jump, or at the string for sure.
Well, he was pretty amped up at that moment,
He was.
too.
He had already winded us, and
he knew there was bad things around.
Yeah, exactly. He couldn't help himself when the cow call happens, though, and that's all it took. I mean, that whole thing happened within probably, that bull was in our lives for literally 11 seconds, something like that. It's crazy.
Man,
it's
so
can change
weird.
So quick. How whitetail, sometimes it just feels like, I guess because we have trail cameras and stuff, it feels like they're in your life for a season.
Years.
Yeah. And elk, it's just like nothing.
It's cool, though. I like that aspect, That's
it's
one
different.
thing about hunting. It was kind of the thing with Nameless, too, he was in our life for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
and then now he's on my wall. So that's cool, and that's a good story of redemption, man. I have a few of those that I probably will tell here, too. And one of them, I guess it's kind of redemptive, is in 2011. This is the skull plate buck. And so I can't remember why, maybe because we didn't have a stand that hunted good on the wind that we were going to have one morning, but we stayed in that morning. And so the camp we were staying in was actually a house. And if you know anything about the Midwest, you know that a lot of times homesteads are built in pretty treed up,
good
area, good deer country. Same thing as like townships are built around a creek system almost always. If you come into a river bottom or a creek system in the Midwest, there's probably a town there on that road, So same thing with the house here. So we have deer that hang out in the yard and stuff, at this particular camp that we were using for a few years. And there's a big window by the kitchen. And so that morning I get my cereal, or whatever, and I sit in the dining room looking out the window up the hill, and there's a silo there with range cubes in it for the cattle. Well, the deer start coming out and eating these range cubes that have kind of leaked out. Yeah. And so I look up there. I'm like, hey, that's a pretty good buck. So I get the binos real quick. It's early in the morning. I see him. I'm like, man, I think it's a big 7-point, I'm like, that's the deer I want to shoot right there. He looks like a big, just old, gnarly 7-point. And that's what I usually have been shooting, a lot of times up there is just the older deer on the property that nobody really wants to shoot because it's not a 160, So, and I love that. So I'm fine with shooting those deer. So I can't remember exactly what happened between, then and that afternoon. But my dad and I decided to go hang a stand in a place that we had always seen deer from the road on the property there that was pretty close to the house there. And so we drive down the road, take a stand, put it up in a little elm tree in a little shelter belt, and it's like 11, 12 foot high, probably not very high. And so I go back, I get showered up real quick, scent free and everything, and I walk back down the road and get up in my stand, and we had a set of trail camera as well there, just see what was coming through or whatever while we were there. And so I walk in and get in the stand, and it didn't take long, and literally just does are covering me up, dude. It's a place to hang out. I think they bed real close there, and just a kind of a real community spot for deer. So there's literally a dozen does probably around me, and they're all just doing their thing, eating a little green grass in the shelter belt there, here and there, and I'm just like, they're like, every once in a while I think they'll catch a sniff of me, a little whiff, and kind of get weird and do this and that. So I'm just like frozen because I'm in this tree, 12-foot max. There's not. It's December, so it's late in the year. There's no leaves on anything, and I'm just got does everywhere, and they're just all just like stomping and stuff around me, like dadgummit. And so luckily, I guess very luckily, a buck comes in to kind of get the attention off me, and this is something I like when it happens, because you can get away with just about anything when a buck starts coming in running does around everywhere, And so this buck, I didn't know at the time that it was a buck, but I could hear something back behind me, and I'm just still frozen because there's deer everywhere, and it's going just making this weird sound like every 15, 30 seconds, minute, whatever, and it's doing that, and I can hear it. And the does kind of start looking over there, and everything, and I'm like, what in the world? And I can just hear him, and he's getting closer and closer. So finally I'm like, it's got to be a buck making a weird noise or whatever. I don't know if he's like lip curling or what. So I just like, as slow as you can imagine, start moving my head sideways, and like got my eyes just so far out the side of my head, trying to see or whatever. And I finally get my head turned around, and I'm going so slow. It's painful. And finally I get my head turned around far enough where I can see that it's a buck. And so I don't remember if I had my bow with me or not on that side, but I get my bow, all this is happening real slow. And he's walking down the edge of this shelter belt, to basically, 20 yards from me, and I get everything finally where I'm ready, and I'm kind of got squared up and I'm ready, and he gets into my shooting lane. I draw back and I shoot, and same deal, I hit a little bit left, which is back on him at the time, and so I've in the past those years I was shooting a lot of deer kind of off the shoulder, and I don't know if it was just like being scared to hit the shoulder, I think is what it was maybe. So I've tried to shoot a little tighter in the last few years. But anyway, I hit him back a little bit, and he runs off. It was a big 7, by the way, for what I thought. He ends up being a big 8. But he had just a small G3 on one side, but big like 12-inch G2s. I mean, tall blades, But anyway, I hit him. He runs out in this field, makes a huge loop around, and goes back to the like perpendicular shelter belt tree line. And he runs like 75 yards, stops, and then just walks his way in. I mean, when he stops, I'm like, please go down, please go down. And he literally walks like 100 yards slow while I'm saying, please go down. And he never goes down. He goes in that shelter belt. And so I'm like, okay, he's going to go in there in bed, and that'll be it, So I text my dad, then go back and meet him at the camp. We decide we're going to wait a couple hours and go in there in the night. So we do. And we track this dude down this shelter belt forever, dude, and it's so thick, and there's not a whole lot of blood, but it's decent, and we just trail him, and we get back, we're going back towards the house kind of, and we get far down there, and it gets to the point where it's so thick that I'm like literally doing like laser beam, jungle gym in here trying to get through this stuff. And we were like, okay, let's just do it in the morning. We can't see anything, and so we leave out. We go, try to get some sleep. Get up the next morning, and a front starts rolling in, and we start to look for this deer again. We pretty much couldn't find hardly any blood from the point that we were at last night. Mm-hmm. We were probably, 200 yards from the house maybe. So I'm like, well, he probably dipped out into that creek system by the house there. So I was like, it's getting cold. The wind started picking up real crazy, man. It was freezing cold. And I was like, let's just go walk this creek drainage out. And we were getting to the point where we're like, I don't know how we're going to find this deer unless we find him in that creek drainage dead, And so we go in there and we walk it just kind of back and forth all the way down towards the house. And we're like, man, I was like, man, I'm hungry. And he was like, yeah, me too. So my dad and I go into the house and we're like, we're going to fix lunch. And we talked about going back out to look again, but we were about done. And I'm telling this story fast, but I mean, this is over the course of hours and hours of looking,
sure.
And so we go into the house, we're going to get something to eat, and we say we're going to go back out. Who knows what actually happens from that point forward. And so I'm like, my dad goes in, starts fixing chips and salsa and sandwiches or something like that, and I go to the bathroom. And when I walk into the bathroom and I start taking a leak, I look out the bathroom window, and I almost jumped out of my boots. It scared me so bad. This dude is dead, laying 20 yards from the back of the house the yard, looking like dead, but looking at me. It freaked me out, dude.
So, did you finish what you're doing, or did you pinch it off?
Oh, I pinched it off, dude. I was like, I yelled from the bathroom. I was like, I found him.
Thought you were going to be like, come look at this. And you're going to be like, no.
I did. I told him. I think I did. That's what I said. I said, come look at this or whatever. And he comes in there, I was like, hey, check this out. He comes in there. I was like, look through this window. He looks out there. He goes, you got to be kidding me. We were standing in the shower looking at a buck out the window.
That's funny.
So we found he literally, I guess that night had, come down there and under the darkness of night, he just, bedded down right there in the yard and died.
Yeah.
Crazy, dude. Crazy.
So was that ended up being a liver hit, or was it guts?
I think liver. Yeah. I don't even know. Man, I'm pretty bad about not paying attention to that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I just try to rip through and get the guts out real quick and just be done with it.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite thing to do. You and my wife are more like doctors about it, just
see
don't
what's
care.
going on.
I'm like, I need some water to wash this stuff off real quick.
Yeah. Well, that's a cool story, man.
Yeah.
And that place up there has been pretty good to you right there. And it's cool to see that it's right there next to the house. How far was that stand from the house?
Well, that stand is probably 300 yards, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's changed over time. Like the older I get, the closer it seems like it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when I first started hunting up there, I was like, oh yeah, it's that's at least a half mile.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how once you do walk like half miles or 2 miles to go hunting, it's like okay, that's really not that far.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that little experience taught you a lot. And I actually have a buck that taught me a ton that I never got to kill on Texas Public. In 2013, I had moved back from the college town I moved to a long time before that, and took like 7 or 8 victory laps. I don't know. I was in College Station from 2007 until February 2013, and moved. Maybe May 2013. Anyways, moved back, and I got to hunt East Texas in 2013, and I've been gone for so long I'd lost all my permission places and never really thought I'd need them again. That kind of thing. Well, that's when I kind of had dedicated myself to public that year. I actually went elk hunting that year with a recurve. That was a whole different debacle. But came back and bought a bow off of Brennan, Matthews Adrenaline, which is still one of my favorite bows ever. I still have that and might shoot it again one of these days. I don't know. But anyways, I had done quite a bit of hunting on public and had continued to push further and further in until the point I got to where I was walking in 1.7 miles one way to go to this stand. And when I did that, I would commit a whole day to it. I would go in, start walking at 4:30 in the morning, and come back out at like 7 at night. Mm-hmm. So bringing a lot of stuff with you, a lot of food. That was way before I owned anything lightweight. So all my clothes were just cheap, some type of Wrangler or just real tree off the shelf cotton stuff or whatever. And actually that year I went and bought one of those redhead waterproof jackets. That was like the nicest piece of hunting clothing I ever had. And because it also got down to like 9 degrees that winter. But anyways, to get back to the buck, I'd pushed back there quite a ways, and I'd had a friend tell me that 2 years before that he'd shot a really good deer near there. And he had kind of pointed me in the right direction. He wasn't hunting public that year, so I kind of went back there. And the stand, I love to sit high in tree stands. You know this. And that stand was 33 feet to the platform from the ground. But I loved it because I could see so much stuff. It's a big old oak tree, too. Really giant oak tree. And I could see, like, some ag fields. I could see a big bedding area. And I could look down and kind of see deer moving throughout the terrain out there. Deer I'd never even get to encounter that day, but I get to watch them and learn some stuff about them. Well, I guess it was along about... it'd be late November. I had seen a buck run out, or not run, I'm sorry. He just kind of meandered his way out to the middle of this clearing and bedded down. So, well, that's weird. And I was thinking, I wonder if he's going to come over here. Well, the next time I went in, I'd gone and borrowed binoculars from my granddad because I didn't even carry binoculars with me back then. And the next time I was in there, he did the same thing. About 10 o'clock, here came this buck, and he would go bed down in the middle of that clearing. So I put my binos on him and figured out this is a giant, big buck, okay? Well, this proceeds to happen about 4 times out of the next 7 times I hunted that place. That deer did that. And on the 4th time, that buck got up and headed my direction. And that's when I kind of started losing control of my bodily functions. You know, it's like...
TT'd yourself?
Oh, my goodness, yes. And this is the biggest buck I've ever seen. The first time I've ever seen, like, not just a big mature deer, but, like, antler-wise, we're talking mid-150s on Texas Public, which is a toad. This deer... there's only kind of 2 trails, okay, that lead my direction. There's one that kind of goes 15 yards from my stand, and there's one that goes about 90 yards from my stand. And he's pretty much going the way that he's going to come to me. So I know things are happening. This is good. And that's the best thing about that is that since I just purchased that bow from Brennan, I didn't have my sights set up all the way. I only had through, I think, 40 yards. What am I trying to say? It was dialed in or whatever, right? Or no, I think it might have been 30. It was 30. That's why because I wouldn't have taken much over a 40-yard shot at that point in time anyways. But I only had through 30 sighted in, so I was like, this deer has to come pretty close, you know? And he gets to about 50, and I'm freaking out, right? I'm plenty high up in a tree or whatever. My wind's good. It's just, like, perfect, man. And I don't know what it was, but that deer stopped. He never was alarmed, but he stood in one place for about 7 minutes and then turned around and walked off. Just walked the way he came. My wind never switched, and nothing ever did anything weird.
No ground scent?
No ground scent there. I came in from a different side. Nothing. Something about that buck, he just knew something was up. And that's something that, in deer hunting, we all try to have these answers for, like, oh, you know, the wind swirled, or, oh, he called the ground scent, or whatever. And, man, I know there's a reason for everything, right? It's not like he just has the cognizant ability to just sense my presence. But mature big bucks are a different critter. And that deer, I remember going home and making a Facebook post about this and saying how big deer change your perspective on the way you view hunting. Like, they're the way you have to do things. Because I don't know, man. I know that I'd been down the trail that he was on a couple days before. I don't know if, like, one little scent molecule from those couple days was still floating around and hadn't been, like, you know, vaporized or whatever they do. You know, I don't know why it happened, but it was a really, really weird thing. And what it taught me is that you can't just sit around and wait on something like a big deer to come by like that. Like, I was so glued to a tree stand that I didn't notice that there was actually a pattern on a mature buck in public land I could go take advantage of, but I wanted him to come to me.
Like, when you say he bedded in the same area, did he bed in the same bed, or like how close?
I never went over there.
Yeah.
But I would imagine it was the same bed. I
Really?
mean, it was 500 yards probably from me when he was doing this. But, I mean, it was like almost on the clock, around the 10 o'clock hour. And some days he wouldn't get up, or at least I wouldn't see him leave. And then that one day he got up probably, golden hour, 30 minutes before dark, and was making it my way to go check does up there where I was at. And I was so close to killing a toad.
That year you passed some good deer too.
I did pass
from that same stand, I guess.
Yeah, because I'd seen him, and it kind of changed my perspective. And I was so far back, I wasn't gonna just shoot anything because it was gonna be a booger to get it out, And between seeing that giant buck, I passed a really good 8-point that I would love to see on public right now. Just good mature 4.5+-year-old 8-point, 17, 18 inches wide. That morning was crazy that I saw that deer too. By the way, that's a different story. But just a good Texas rut day. He don't have a whole lot of those.
Yeah.
But man, that for a deer that I never got to shoot. That buck, he didn't really teach me a ton, but he led me down a path to wanting to learn more about deer, and I've learned so much because of that deer and its experience. My experience.
Man, I'm waiting on the day we find another big one like that that's kind of using the same pattern over and over again.
I know it, man.
I mean, it's weird because a pattern like that is what probably kept that deer alive for so long, but at the same time, if you knew what you're doing, or not to say you didn't, I'm saying as a dude, if you knew what you were doing, that's how you capitalize on deer, their patterns.
But the thing is that that buck figured it out. Dudes sit in tree stands, and he was in a place that there wasn't a lot of stand trees around, and between that and the fact that he's just way back, and just in a good spot. That deer just had it figured out, and he actually did get killed that year. And we have pictures. The pictures kind of circulated a little bit, and the old boy killed him. Kudos to him. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
He is a awesome buck. Golly.
Yeah, he is, man. That, I guess it was a year before that is when I actually shot my biggest deer.
Really?
And there's not a whole lot of story to it necessarily, but I guess there is a little one. We had been running a trail camera and had pictures of him, and there was a couple of real good bucks in there. But this one had a distinct characteristic of 2 split G2s. And anyway, so I go in, I guess this is my first hunt that year in 2012. And I go in on November 7th, I believe it was, somewhere right in there, early November. And it is forecasted to be 76 degrees that day. And it was balmy and warm as I'm sitting there in the early morning. And I can remember no wind at all. And I can remember sitting there just going, man, this has got to be the worst day I've sat in a stand in a long time. And I don't remember what all I had seen that day exactly, but one of the first deer that came in, he appears at out of the cedars at 40 yards. And I almost couldn't believe my eyes, dude. And it was this big split G2 buck that I've been kind of hoping that would come in, big bodied dude. And so he comes in and gets to 25 yards, and all of a sudden, and like I said, it's dead quiet. All of a sudden, so there was some people hunting. They were hunting in the area, but not any adjacent properties to us. But they were staying in a house across the street from our camp. And they kind of drove us crazy because they were real close. I mean, they were essentially on our property, right next to our property that we were hunting, making a bunch of noise and, causing a ruckus at night and everything. Well, so this is literally 2 miles away. I mean, it's a long ways, and a car alarm from those dudes goes off. Apparently they didn't get up and go hunting, because they'd been staying up all night or whatever. Car alarm goes off while this buck gets to 25 yards from me, or 20 something. He was real close, and he it like startles him when it goes off. And this thing is distant, but it's just such an unnatural noise for that area. He like bounds off, and I yank my bow back and grunt stop and guess him at 27. So he didn't go too far, you know. I guess him at 27. At this point, I don't think I'd ever shot a deer without a rangefinder, you know, like other than rifle stuff, you know. And I let it fly at 27, shot between my, between my pins, or held a little bit high or something on a 25-yard pin or something like that. It smokes him. He's quartered away pretty hard. And, I mean, it was like perfect, dude. And he takes off running. Arrow's kind of just barely sticking out. He takes off running, disappears down the same trail at like 40 yards. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure as soon as he got in those cedars, I saw him like just flip over and die. But I don't know. So anyway, I called my dad and told him, you know, and actually our buddy Anthony, I had just become friends with him prior to the season or whatever, you know. So I texted him too. I was like, dude, I just shot a big one, you know. And so my dad gets there, we get down, and we start walking down that trail, and I can see into the cedars before I even get there. He's just laying right there. He ran he may have gone 20 yards. I mean, smoked.
Golly.
And I was super pumped, man. I think he's going to be right at about 160. I measured him once, and I can't remember what I measured him at, but it was just a rough score, you know. Mm-hmm. But he's going to be right there, high 150s, 160.
So, and you didn't video that?
No. Mm. I had videoed one that I killed there the year before, too.
Yeah.
But I just had gotten to the point where, like, I had been kind of videoing with a buddy of ours, a mutual friend, and he kind of pieced out on it. And so I kind of got to the point where I was like, well, what's the point even, you know, or whatever. So, unfortunately, I don't have any video of that deer, but that's okay. I got a good memory. That's for sure.
That's cool.
But anyway, yeah, that's you know, that was actually out of my dad's stand. Which, have you ever been down there?
Never been there.
It's a pretty good little spot.
I hear that.
Yeah,
it's a word on the street.
Yeah, yeah. So
your dad's always like, anybody can have it if they want it. You know?
Yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good spot, but at the same time, like, he only hunts it on good winds, and
that's why it's a good spot.
Yeah, and all that. So there's other good spots. I mean, there's been huge deer down at his spot that have been at other places, other stands. So yeah. Well,
we went from the biggest. Let's go to the smallest.
Okay.
So we're going pretty recent here. I shot a buck in 2018.
Dang.
On Texas Public.
Yeah.
That was a spike. And I was thrilled by it. Kind of want to, man, there's not a lot of times, at least on Texas public land, that you get like a good hunt story. Mm-hmm. It's like deer runs through, you might get a shot, you know. But this buck, you know, earlier we talked about the bull being alive for like 11 seconds. I knew this buck from 9:45 until 11:30 or something like that. Yeah. Like, he was in my life. Had a kind of a lackluster morning. I actually missed another spike before that, who jumped my string from a place that's always been pretty good to me, about string jumping, that is. So missed him. I was kind of bummed. And then this other spike comes in and like works a scrape, eats some stuff, and then beds down at like 60 yards. I'm like, what is going on? So this is like probably my last opportunity to hunt that season, or I'm not going to have a lot more because my vehicle had broken down and I was kind of down the dumps. But I actually was looking for used cars when this deer came in, but on my phone. But this buck comes in and beds down at 60 yards. And I'm like, what am I going to do about this? Like, I don't really want to get down. I'd like to kill that deer. I was really going to shoot any legal deer I could that day.
Mm-hmm. Me too. And
it was New Year's Day, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
so.
Yep.
So it stayed up a little bit later than I wanted to the night before, you know, that whole thing. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to grunt and doe bleat and all kinds of stuff over here. Just make him think that there's deer over here. Because where my stand is, there's kind of a drop behind the stand, so there'd be deer that would be out of his range of view. And so I start grunting, and he'd look, And then, like, you know, he'd look around for 3 or 4 minutes, and then he'd kind of chill out. And then I'd grunt again, and he'd look again. And this went on for, like, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. Every 2 or 3 minutes, I'd make a noise. And finally, he gets up. And I'm like, all right, he's coming. Well, then he just mills over and goes out of my sight, like, and doesn't come my direction. I'm like, dadgummit. So I'm bummed. Start looking at my phone again, and I hear, you know, the good noise. And so it's like, what is going on? Put my phone down. Grab my bow, get the camera set up, and here he comes, just right through my shooting lane. You know, I got a pretty good-sized lane in this one spot, and he just comes right through this opening. And at 30 yards, I don't remember if I grunt stopped him or not. This is all on video, so y'all can go watch it if you want.
I think you did.
Did I grunt stop him?
Think so.
Meatbuck video. So probably grunt stopped him, shot, and put a pretty good shot on him. It hit a touch high, I think. I think he might have jumped a little bit or something. I don't know, but just dropped him in his tracks. That's the first time I've ever done that with a bow. It wasn't really a spine shot either. It was like high lung.
Yeah.
But I guess it was just a little deer.
It hit that off
arrow.
shoulder, didn't it?
Yeah, it kind of buried in the off shoulder. Arrow didn't go all the way through. You know, it penetrated in that shoulder. So every bit of the energy was transferred into the deer. And shooting a fixed blade, but like a wide cutting fixed blade that's kind of blunt, and I feel like it's like a fast energy transfer with that thing. So I think it was just a shock thing where it just dropped him, and ended up having to go down and put a second shot in him to just finish him off. But he was bleeding, but you know, it's kind of like weird to like sit there and watch a deer kind of do its thing and die. So I went ahead and shot him again. But anyways, I don't think I've ever been more excited for a deer that scored 11 than ever that day, because, I mean, we'd zeroed for quite a while on Texas Public. It's like ever since Scar happened, it's like it was downhill from there. You know what I mean? And I passed a deer the next year I should have never passed. That's on YouTube too, the shooter pass video, I think is what it's called. And then ever since then, it's been pretty tough to get remotely close to decent deer. And then, you know, a legal buck comes out. There's like a week left in the season, and you and I both need some meat. It's like it's time to lay the hammer down.
Yeah.
And
well, you had actually had an encounter with a big buck there in November too, in that same stand. Yeah. Remember so I was supposed to go hunting with KC that morning.
That was November 1st, yeah.
And, so my daughter got sick and started throwing up that night. And so I texted him at whatever time we were supposed to wake up, 3 or whatever, you know. And it's like, hey, you know, my daughter told me my daughter was sick, and I was like, we're probably not going to be able to make it today because my wife's got to go to work and I got to watch her. So,
yeah. And
unfortunately, if you'd had a cameraman that day, you'd have shot that deer.
Oh,
so
it's all right.
But
got to shoot a spike buck instead. So
yeah, and that stand's been good over the years, man. There's something about, like, I don't know, I get a little nostalgic and sentimental about a good stand location.
Oh yeah, man, it's funny how it works, because that place is like, you look at it on a map or something, and it's like, I mean, it looks good, but there's 100 other places that look like that around there. But there's just something about that spot, just the way the deer move through there. Yeah, it's bad at the bone.
It is, man. Good wind too, and all that. But I have a kind of a similar story about not a similar story, but a similar stand location that's been pretty awesome. And I talked about it with that 2011 buck that saw out of the bathroom. So we hung it there in 2011, and there's been a lot of deer shot out of that stand since. And you know, can't really figure out why, and the fact they just like that area, you know. And so, but yeah, so you know, basically, this story will come back around to that stand. But in 2013, I ended up stalking a buck into like 20 yards that was near a particular stand location that we had down on this creek system. And I was actually picking up a ground blind and we were gonna pick it up, take it, and my dad and TJ and I, and we came up over the hill, and this deer is standing there. It's windy, so he can't hear us or see us or anything. He's just chilling down in the cedars or whatever, kind of out of the wind. And I go stalk down through the cedars, and I mean, no time at all. I'm in my Carhartt and blue jeans, and I smoked him at like 20 yards, you know. and there's a little more story to it, but it's not
Which
that exciting.
deer is that?
This is he's a big 7, just a Euro mount that you've seen, probably heavy, old deer. Anyway, I was really glad to get that deer because I actually wasn't going to be able to hunt anymore that year. Like I was done hunting. I mean, that's why I was in blue jeans and a Carhartt, and just happened the last hour deal, And but anyway, so actually the next year in that same stand, in the stand location there, I'm sitting there, and that's 2014, and I had a few encounters with this buck over the years in 2012 and 2013. And he had been busted up a bunch both years, just a fighter, I don't know how old this deer is. We've got a shed prior to 2012 of this deer. But my dad called him the brow tine buck, just huge brow tines. One of them's probably 10 or 11 inches. And
unique rack, too.
Yeah, he's funky kind of. Yeah, he's
like
not
he
symmetric.
looks like a deer, but it's a lot different than normal whitetails.
Yeah, he's not symmetric. Like one main beam is higher than the other. When it comes forward, those main beams are real long. His G2s are shorter than his G3s, and both of them curl out instead of in. It's kind of weird. Anyway, so this buck, just a stud, man, old deer, square body. And I actually have footage of him running around chasing does in that stand location on like November 14th or something. And I had started getting involved with some guys that we were going to start videoing our hunts and stuff and trying to pursue that again. And we really wanted to kind of raise the bar with a higher production level. And so that was kind of our game. And so, anyway, this, I had the video camera with me, but I didn't have a video guy or even I was hunting out of a tripod in a cedar tree along that creek system. And so I didn't even have a camera arm, and this was a great day. I had hog body, which the midget deer, come in. I had a huge 8 that later got shot. I passed him. He was a 4-year-old. We were trying to get him another year, but some guy shot him, and he was a 143-inch 8-point. And then this buck came in, the brow tine buck, and I was like, man, I would shoot that deer in a heartbeat. He's chasing stuff around, like I said, just square body, dark feet, just from stomping in the mud, being heavy, big horns. And anyway, I passed him because I thought, okay, well, I know the area he's in, and this is also based off of a lot of history with this deer, knowing what area he's in. I'll come back and hunt this deer next time I'm up here with my buddy.
And this is low pressure.
Yes.
And your dad isn't going to shoot that deer.
Right. Yeah. So, there was nobody else really that was going to hunt that year that was going to shoot any deer, I don't think, and end up shooting that deer. And I just like hunting, man. I mean, I like to be in a stand when it's cold and it feels good and just let you know you're alive, man. So anyway, I was like, I need my buddy to come back and video me so we can get this deer, kill on camera and kind of help, just advance what we have in, what we're trying to get after with our careers and our lives, lives and everything. So anyway, come back in December. My buddy doesn't come with me. And I was like, dadgummit, dude, like you said you were going to be here, So anyway, I go into this hunt, and my dad, the first afternoon, he sees the brow tine buck from the road. My dad's already tagged out, or whatever. He sees the brow tine buck from the road, driving kind of in that golden hour, in the same kind of location or whatever. So I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, I think he's going to end up back at that stand that I shot the buck in 2011 from, that we hung that same day. And so end up, over the course of a couple of days, going back over there. And the last morning that we were going to hunt the whole year, it was like December 17th, I think. It was the last morning we were going to leave out that morning. I end up hunting that stand, and he comes through real early. It comes right down the same direction as the other buck did, and down the tree line there. And I shot him, and it was pretty dark. It was very early, I guess is what I'm saying. Shot him, and he runs out into some pretty tall CRP, and I kind of lose him out there. And anyway, I told my dad, text him or whatever. He comes out there and meets me, and I start following blood or whatever. I'm like, man, he ran that same loop and ended up maybe going back around into that tree line. I don't know. Well, we get out there like 120 yards, and there he is sitting there deader than a doorknob, with an arrow in him or whatever. So that was a pretty cool thing. And then actually I ended up shooting a deer there next year in the exact same stand location known as One-Eyed Jack. And I'm sure some of you guys have heard us talk about that deer, but that video's on our YouTube channel.
We haven't talked about Jack in a while, really. You know?
Yep.
I guess 2015 is kind of getting kind of far away right now.
Yeah, so. I mean, we kind of hyped it up in 2016 a little bit maybe, and 2017 he ran that film ran as part of the film tour or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, we hadn't talked about him since that thing kind of ran in the film tour, and he's an awesome buck. I saw him yesterday. He's hanging in my dad's hunting room, and I'm just so ready to have a house that I can put him in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I hear you, man. That's cool. And that kind of brings us into we've mentioned some hunts that we've been together on here, but like that after Jack, like that's when we started kind of hunting together for the 2016 season. I didn't go to Kansas with you in 2016, but and
I didn't shoot a deer in 2016.
That's like one of the first times in a while you hadn't shot a deer at all. You didn't shoot a deer?
I shot a doe.
Here?
Remember?
Yeah, the October doe.
You videoed that doe. Yeah. Or no, I videoed that.
Yeah,
doe.
you did.
You videoed 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's been a little while, man.
Yeah, I know.
But anyways, that takes us to probably 2017 in Kansas, which
it was a good year.
You already know that was a good time.
You already know.
Yeah, I got to go as a cameraman, and I wasn't even didn't have a weapon, and it was pretty cool and like a different fun feeling to do that. And we kind of got to put our heads together and did the public thing and made a pretty sick film about that.
It was, man. I'm still really proud of that film, and it's actually picked up a lot of steam. Seems like a lot of people are still enjoying watching that thing lately, and maybe more than ever, because it's growing tremendously, the views on that thing. So if you haven't seen it, I'm sure if you tune into what we do every once in a while, you probably have heard us talk about it. But if you haven't seen it, you can go watch the film on YouTube. It's called Nameless. It's about a buck that didn't have a name, and it was a very big public land buck. The story of that deer we won't tell because we pretty much did that on episode 43 called Rut Raging Rooster. So go check that one out after this.
Yeah, that was I bet you that's fun. I need to go listen to that podcast because we were like on top of the world.
We were eating Whataburger between. Like we did like half the podcast, ate some Whataburger, and then came back and did some more.
So good, man.
That was a good trip home, man.
Yeah, that was fun, man. And then last year we did what we did. We talked about spike buck thing or Meatbuck, and then we spent a lot of time up in Kansas chasing deer across the plains, and I missed a buck that was pretty heartbreaking. Has since made me want to shoot a lot more fixed blades, which interestingly enough today I shot a fixed blade at the target and actually hit a tree on the way, hit a limb, and hit the target just fine.
Really?
Yep.
How about
it
that?
Sliced the limb off and right into the target.
How about that?
And it was it was a 40-yard shot, and I hit the limb at like 25, and then if it was a deer, it killed it. So
it's cool.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
But that's on the late rut.
No,
right?
that was day 5 of the first rut series.
Yeah. So Rutcation on YouTube. We'll link all this stuff below in the show notes if you want to watch.
I believe
and then
day 5.
On late rut, I stalked a buck. That was kind of crazy. And I shot at him, but it was kind of like a, I don't know, last-ditch effort kind of thing.
Like an Indian thing.
Yeah, it's like,
I'm hungry.
And I hit him if he hadn't moved, but he moved. So anyways, and then we hunted together in Kansas a lot, but then my vehicle broke down, and I was kind of pretty tight for funds in December, and Mr. December went to Kansas by himself.
Yep. Did it on the first night,
First night. Man.
That's just my month, man.
I know.
It's my jam.
What day was that?
That was December 12th, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just love, I don't know, I don't love cold weather at all. My toes are long and they get cold, but man, I just do love when I'm sitting there and it's brisk and you just like, it don't matter if the rut's going or not, like deer are moving because it's cold, and it's just good deer hunting weather, and it's just a good time of year where you get to see a lot, you get to reflect on a lot, and honestly, I would have loved to have gone up there with you again, but it's a good thing and a good kind of like refreshing thing to go by yourself sometimes.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure, man.
Not necessarily out of state even, but just, you know, to be in a stand by yourself here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one thing that some guys don't get, especially, you know, guys that may be doing it for TV or whatever. I mean, some of those guys, their lifestyle is so ingrained in their TV that they never go out without a camera guy in the stand with them. And so, and that's whatever. If they don't, if that's their deal,
Yeah,
that's
friendship's
fine.
cool. Like,
Yeah.
I love that you and I get to do
Me too.
like stuff in the stand together. But you're right. Like, if you're not there, like, I don't have anybody to pee on me or anything. You know, it's kind of nice.
Yeah,
but
yeah, exactly.
No, but
Just don't pee up wind, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Or pee in a bottle. That's a bad idea. But anyways, it's cool to get to go out, and that's why I like going elk hunting up there where we do, because a lot of times I'll go out and just kind of just sit in the mountains by myself, you know, and it's pretty surreal.
Yeah.
I like to feel small.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's not something you get a lot of in like your everyday. So when you get to go out and just get really deep into the outdoors or into nature, you can kind of feel that way.
Yeah, for sure. And just allows you, especially when you go to these places that might not have very good service, it allows you to just get away from all the just clutter and just things that pull your attention, man, and just to think about the things that are important, which could include yourself, especially if you have kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good thing, and so I got to go out there, and it was actually a really quick turnaround trip. But you know, even just driving, you know, like half the time I listen to maybe a podcast or something here and there, or some music here and there, but like half the time I'm sitting there just driving, looking at stuff and thinking, you know, and that's a good thing to get into your own mind sometimes and do that. And so
it's healthy.
Got to kill Frankenstein on that first day, though.
Yeah.
We set up on him. I set up on him because of the intel that you and I had kind of put together from the previous trip in the late rut. We discovered that he was still alive, and Frankenstein was, you know, so I killed him in 2018, December. In October of 2015, my buddy actually shot him, and I videoed him shoot him.
It's nuts.
And he was really old then. So, you know, telling how old he is. I mean, 10 plus, I think. And just lucky to be there. I think honestly that deer was gonna not make it through the winter probably, especially as cold as it got last year.
Sure.
So, but cool deal, man. And that video is online as well too, and has plenty of haters on it. 'Cause I didn't make a great shot.
It happens, man.
But yeah, so. Anyway, been fun talking about this, dude.
It's
good to reminisce.
It's good kind of leading into the season. It's got that good feel. You know what I mean?
I know. It got me hyped.
Ain't nothing like hyping you up about thinking about your. For me, honestly, it's like I've kind of struck out on whitetail a little bit lately. So it's kind of like, man, do I have something coming this year? You know, like what's going to happen?
Well, dude, you've passed some good deer on Texas Public too.
Yeah, I'm stupid too.
Well,
so.
I mean. It's, you know, you tough too, though. You know, if you're stupid, you got to be tough. They say.
Yeah, I guess so. But man, I feel like last year we learned a ton running around, right? And I feel like this year there's going to be way less moments when we're going to be like, what should we do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we've kind of, by doing so many crazy things, we've kind of encountered a lot of those situations. There's still going to be new things every time you go, right? But I feel like, especially with just diving deeper into map scouting and stuff like that, there's always going to be a situation where it's like, okay, well, today we got a weird wind. It's like a northeast. Well, you're going to say, okay, we got these 3 spots. Let's go there, or whatever it might be. Like, the more you get out and do it, the more you're going to feel confident in your abilities to do it, if that makes sense. You know? And that's why it's good to think back on all these stories and think about the stuff you messed up doing and the stuff you did right, and then you can just take it and apply it to what you need to do now.
Yep. It's a good point, man. It's probably a good way to wrap this thing up. We actually will be showcasing these bucks and bulls on our social media over the next week or so, and so make sure and follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and follow us there. And subscribe on YouTube, because a lot of these hunts that we talked about are on YouTube, or will be.
That's right.
And if you ever bring me that mini DVD, I'll put it on YouTube quick. I think Casey may be a little embarrassed about that one.
It's long enough. It's been over 10 years. I can probably get away with being a foolish young guy.
You're a different human now.
Yeah.
So.
Nah, I mean, I still be that excited, I think.
Yeah.
But I handle myself differently.
Channel it better.
Yeah, exactly. I was Caleb Waddy Smith that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Kentucky.
Yeah. Anyways,
So but subscribe to the YouTube so that you can see that stuff when we do upload it and see the ones that we've got up there. We'll link to all the videos that we have that we mentioned today in a story in the show notes. So there's probably a ton of links here below, and then also subscribe to the podcast if you've enjoyed these last few episodes.
That's right. Please do that. Also, as we're leading into the season, I think a lot of people do this, and I kind of am drawn to do it too. But like, if you want to post some stuff about like past hunts or deer you've killed or whatever, tag us in that stuff because I'd like to see it. Because Tyler, if you haven't noticed, Tyler and I like hunting stories. We do big buck breakdowns in the fall because we want to get our friends on and hear their stories. So tag us in your photos on Insta and Facebook and stuff so we can see some of the stuff you've killed in the past and some of the stories of that.
Yeah, for sure. So also, don't forget we have a giveaway going on iTunes/Apple Podcasts. I want to say music every time. But so go to your app, give us a review, and you're in the running for the BINOs, the OnX, and the trail camera that we will be giving away because I'm sure you guys will give us enough to get us to that mark 300.
That's right.
We have about a month left or a little more before we choose the winner. You'll be ready and equipped for deer season with that stuff.
It's less than a month then we go hunting. Woo! Can you believe it? 2 weeks for you.
I know, it's going quick, man.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope you guys are going to have a great season this year and make some stories like these. And remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.